on law. We went through, I think you've got the information on a little bit on the opioid and I have some discussion questions. We're going to go through that. He'll probably present for until about 6 o'clock, or actually just before 6 o'clock,
before.
Quarter of. I'll give you a break and then the quiz will start. So he's got some handouts, and if we can get the whiteboard going, we'll have him write some notes. And that'll be this class. So if you have any questions, I'm going to ask him to repeat the questions. So, because he has a lavalier on, so he can, it'll be picked up by the camera. And then from there, hopefully we'll have it up so you guys can review it, and the rest of the class can review it as well. Okay, so thanks. So
Great, thanks, Bonnie.
Yeah.
Well, good evening, everyone. Some of you are way back there. I won't bite if you want to move up a little bit, but I'll talk pretty loudly. Can you hear me in the back okay? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, if you want to move up, that's fine. So as Bonnie said, my name is David Scott. I'm an attorney in private practice. Have been so for a long time, more than 3 decades. Have a full service law practice. I do mostly civil litigation and business related law. I have done criminal defense. I did speak at another class a while ago, and I was introduced as a criminal lawyer. And I had to correct the professor and say, I'm a lawyer who practices criminal law. I am not a criminal lawyer. There is a difference. So I was invited to come and speak with you tonight for a little bit, and your professor has given me like a huge plate here of stuff to talk about. Not possibly going to be able to cover everything in depth, but hopefully I will give you some relevant information. Now, just help me out here. What are your fields of study? Is everybody in pharmaceutical here in terms of your majors?
I think we're mixed.
It's a mixed class?
Health science that's emphasizing business management.
Okay.
That kind of stuff.
All health related generally?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll try to structure the discussion or lead the discussion on some health-related issues. But the law is universal. It applies to every pursuit. So some of the principles we're going to be talking about might necessarily have anything directly to do with health care, but indirectly they will, because the law touches everything, every pursuit. So what I did is, hopefully you each have received 2 handouts. One is the not really a syllabus, but an outline for tonight's class, and it has 8 topics on it. It really has a lot more than 8. I combined some, but there's 8 headings, and I left space. So, and you note it says in bold, feel free to take copious notes. So I'm not going to do a PowerPoint presentation or anything of that nature. It's going to be a little more free-flowing, and I will, as I cover these topics, if you do have a question, don't hesitate to ask it. Now what I'd ask is, if you'd please raise your hand, because I know the class is being, or my portion at least, is being filmed, and so we don't want everybody talking at the same time, and I have to repeat the question for the camera. So I would ask, just if you have a question, at any time, don't wait for me to jump to the next topic. Raise your hand, and I'll point to you, and then ask the question, I'll repeat it, and then we'll discuss it, okay? All right, and the other handout was something that actually I received through your professor, and that's an interview with a pharmaceutical chief executive, gentleman by the name of, I believe it's Ed Thompson, who basically did an expose on the opioid industry, and I guess it just coincidentally there's an opioid symposium going on tonight. Maybe we should all go there. No, we're here. We're gonna do some stuff here, but so I'm not going to go through the whole article. It's a handout. You can take it home and read it. I found it, and I'm not in the health science field at all, but I found it fascinating and revealing, shocking even. So I will touch on it, but I'm not going to, I gave it to you because I don't want to take too much time in the class to spend on the whole article. So let's jump right in, because time is short and time is money. So let's get going. So this is a discussion of essentially business law. Business law typically is an entire course in most college curriculums. I've taught business law in several colleges. I've written business law courses. I've also taught business law at the master's level. The handout that I gave you is basically an entire business law course, which normally would be in most colleges about, if you do an accelerated adult education, about 20 hours, and I have now less than 45 minutes. So we're really going to move fast, but we'll do our best. So what's important when we have a discussion of the law is to understand what the law is and what it isn't. Somebody says, well, you can't do that. And you say, well, why not? Well, that's illegal. Well, how do I know it's illegal? What's your source? What's your basis for that statement? So really, what is the law? Anybody want to hazard a guess?
It's something that protects people.
Okay, the law protects people. That's a very important function of the law. Any other thoughts? Well, how does the law protect people? Let's spin off that.
I think there's a process that people have to go through in order to, like, say, be convicted or not convicted, right? So there's definitely like that there.
Very important. The law is very much concerned with procedure. In fact, when we talk about the types of law, there's really two types that we look at. Now, there's other subcategories, but I don't know if you can see that. I'll try to make big circles. So we have procedure and we have substance. And which one is more important, do you think? Is the legal process more important than the actual law itself, or vice versa? Or are they equal?
Well, since your graph there starts with the law, then the law supersedes process.
Well, this is just the whole body of the law. And then you have substantive law and procedural law. These are both subsets of law. Well, think about it. If you are accused of a crime, and we recently have seen some very high-profile people being accused of crimes involving education. In fact, they were arraigned yesterday in the United States District Court for the District of Massachusetts in Boston. It's a federal court. Don't you want to have a fair procedure to determine whether you're guilty or innocent? I think we all want that, right? Some countries, they bring you in, they've already decided if you're guilty, and they only bring you into the court to tell you you're guilty and what your sentence is. In the United States, we have a fair and just procedure. Is it a perfect procedure? No, because it in large extent relies on human judgment. You could try the same case before 10 judges and get 10 different decisions. But we at least have a basic procedural system that affords rights to accused individuals and individuals also in the civil law area. Yes, sir.
Is substance like evidence, documents, things like that?
Okay, the question is substance, evidence, or documents? Substantive law is the actual body of law. So you would have under substantive law real estate, contracts, entertainment law, antitrust law. Those are subsets of the substantive law that are formed by our process to determine laws, which is a great segue. So how do we come up with our laws? Who makes our laws? Somebody's got to create all these laws. Anybody remember Civics 101? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I think you're right, but I didn't quite catch it.
Congress?
Congress.
Yeah.
Congress. Okay, Congress is one the legislative process through Congress is one way to create law. Those are called statutes. Once they vote them, and then it goes to the governor or the president, whatever, depending if you're state or federal level, and it's signed or it's vetoed. If it's vetoed, it goes back, and then it requires a 2/3 vote to override. Once that process is complete, then you have a statute that is law. But where does the Congress get its authority to do that, to make law? Anybody ever hear of a document called the United States Constitution? Mm-hmm. Constitution created our system of government, 3 branches, executive, legislative, judicial, and allowed those branches of government to create laws. So you have constitutions are one source of law. Legislative statutes are another source. Do courts make law? Judges make law? Go ahead.
Oh, I thought they just kind of like interpret law.
Courts are supposed to interpret the law. But in interpreting the law, and says, if the court says the law means this and not that, aren't they in effect making new law?
That's why lawyers use court cases as examples.
Exactly. So that's another source of law. It's our third source, court decisions. Massachusetts was the first state to legalize same-sex marriage. That wasn't done by the legislature. That was done by our court system. So sometimes courts will not only interpret laws, but also in that process will create new rights. One of the areas that's become huge, and this is an area that's really going to affect you guys, you're going to deal with this because you're in going into a highly regulated industry. Probably maybe the most, healthcare, maybe the most highly regulated industry, and pharmaceutical and drugs are very highly regulated. Administrative agencies now take up a lot of the burden from the courts in these very specialized areas. And administrative agencies can issue their own rules and regulations within the purview of their narrow scope. So in other words, what's the health agency, federal health agency? FDA? The FDA can't regulate how airplanes fly. That's the FAA. So they have to stay in their lane. Whereas a court of general jurisdiction can decide any kind of case. But agencies have to stay within their specific mandate. So we've got these different, and the other last area of source of law is executive orders. So now we have this lawmaking apparatus of these sources of laws that impact business and what I call the regulatory environment. And like I said, you're going into probably one of the most highly regulated environments there is. One of the things that businesses are concerned with, the most important thing probably businesses are concerned with other than making money, and there's nothing wrong with that. For-profit businesses exist to make money. That's what their stockholders expect, and that's their goal. We're going to discuss, in doing so though, and we just came within the last couple of decades, sort of the decades of greed, I call it, Enron and some of these other abuses by corporate officers, cooking the books, destroying evidence, that sort of thing. Corporations since then now, with Sarbanes-Oxley, have corporate responsibility to be ethical. That wasn't the case before. And when business doesn't regulate itself, the government will step in to protect consumers and to protect investors, because a lot of investors lost everything. You remember the Bernie Madoff case, the investment advisor that, while every other investment company was showing minimal gains or even some losses, his investments always seemed to do great. And yeah, they did great because it was fake news. I mean, he was cooking the reports. So ethics is very big right now in terms of the regulatory environment. Businesses also have something called social responsibility. What does that mean? I thought businesses were supposed to make money. Why do businesses have to have social responsibility?
It's ethical.
Okay? It creates a more ethical environment when a business acknowledges that there are stakeholders who are affected by the business. What do I mean by a stakeholder? Not to be confused with a stockholder. That's somebody who owns stock in the business. Anybody want to guess? Well, think about the people that are affected by a business. Who's affected?
Employees.
Employees, certainly.
The environment can be affected.
The environment, if they're polluting the neighborhood, they're affecting people that live around the business.
Yeah, like when DuPont was making Teflon, that kind of stuff. Or nuclear power.
Yeah. Vendors, suppliers, customers. So businesses touch a lot of people. So they have a social responsibility to not harm those people and to act as a good citizen of the community. So these are fairly new concepts in business that have been evolving over the last couple of decades since the Enron and other scandals. And this is now the new environment for business. And as employees or people dealing with the health care industry, there's a lot of ethical issues with health care and with drugs that are prescribed for people and the type of care they get and who makes decisions and that sort of thing. So, and you're going to be part of that system. So individual ethics are important, but also corporate ethics are important. Corporate ethics really are the sum total of all the individual ethics of all the people that are involved with the corporation or the business. Maybe it's not a corporation, but a business. Businesses are concerned with legal risk. What do I mean by legal risk?
They might not want to get sued.
Yeah, they don't want to get sued. Everything's liability driven today. Everything. We live in the most litigious time in the history of the world. There are so many lawsuits. I mean, the number of lawsuits being filed today compared with even 25 or 50 years ago is astronomical. Now, a lot of it is due that people are more aware of their legal rights. We have the internet, we have social media, we have YouTube. So there's a lot of information out there which previously people did not have access to, and people know a lot more about the legal system. They know a lot more about their legal rights. So liability drives a lot of business decisions, and we call that legal risk. And what businesses want to do is manage that legal risk so that there are fewer lawsuits. If you're a big company like Walmart, you've got a target on your back and people are going to sue you. That's just a fact of life if you are that big. Probably even if you're a drug company, it's going to happen. So you can't prevent every legal risk, but you want to minimize the risk, and you want to have a process to evaluate. First of all, prevention is huge. Have good practices, be ethical, have good internal procedures, train your people, make sure people know what they can do and what they can't do. If you're in a regulatory environment, which you guys will be, absolutely, know what those regulations are, know what the boundaries are. Make sure you train your people so they don't exceed those boundaries and expose the company to risk. So that's all part of it. And then, but in terms of if you do have a claim, then you want to promptly investigate it, evaluate it, and resolve it. Whether that's through litigation, through out-of-court, we call alternative dispute resolution, which could be mediation, arbitration. That's very big right now. Lawsuits are expensive. Most people can't afford to sue. And big companies can afford to defend more than individuals can afford to sue. When you take on it, and I have right now at least one case that pops right into my mind, and I've had many over the years, that I have an individual who's been involved in a lawsuit with a large multinational, even global company. massive company. And I know that they can outlast us, money-wise. So you got to really be careful if you're going to take on a giant company like that. They've got lots of lawyers, lots of money, lots of time, and you don't. Your client usually doesn't.
Why can't there be like a, like say, a minimum amount of earnings that the person earn per year, and like if they like earn below that, right, they can go through the process like much cheaper, like they don't have to pay like court fees or anything like that.
The question, I'll paraphrase it because that's kind of long, but that's a good question. Why isn't there a system for people of certain income levels to not incur as much expense or costs in litigation? There actually is. If you are indigent, you can file an application with the court and all your fees will be waived. You won't have to pay a filing fee. You don't have to pay sheriff's fees and other fees. The government will pay those. So there is, and obviously, or not obviously maybe, but in criminal cases, if you can't afford a lawyer, the government, if you are charged with a crime that could involve incarceration, the government has to provide pay for a defense lawyer for you. So there are, yes, within the litigation system, there are some considerations for people really of no means. There isn't really a lot for people of moderate means. You're
those public defender, they would rather settle than to like actually try to win the case. Is that true?
Okay. Well, I was one for 5 years, so that's a question dear to my heart. I would like to think not. Because regardless of whether you are being paid by the government to represent someone as a lawyer or you are being privately retained to represent someone, you have ethical duties to that client. And one of those duties is to provide zealous representation within the bounds of the law. So I will tell you, it never mattered to me whether I was representing somebody as a government paid attorney or a private attorney. And even in my office today, I will give somebody the same amount of attention to their case in a very small case as this big case against this big global company. Everybody gets the same level of service. Now that's me. Am I going to tell you that there aren't public defenders out there that maybe want to do the more economical thing? I would like to think not, but like any group of people, you probably have a certain people that maybe think that way, but it's not really ethical to do so. I had a case recently. I don't do criminal defense anymore, although once in a while it is just good, clean fun to cross-examine a police officer, but I haven't done one in a while. So actually I say that I have great respect and affection for police officers. A couple of my best friends are police officers, and they would laugh at that too. One of the things my police officer friends tell me, and I tell my clients, is that if the police, if you're involved in an incident and the police call you and say to come to the station that they just want to talk to you, you don't have to go. Just throw that out there. At least not till you talk to a lawyer, which I would strongly recommend. Because if they're asking you to come down to the station, it's not to have coffee with you. You're probably a suspect, so you don't want to do that alone. Where was I?
Well, civil action.
Say again?
Civil action suits versus individual.
Class action, okay. Class action suits, I have never done one. It's really a specialty in the law. Most class action suits are handled by huge firms because they're very, very intensive. And it's really a specialty in itself. Class action basically is where you have a group of people who kind of have suffered the same injury through the same transaction or the same circumstances. And it makes sense to lump them all together in one case. First of all of their interests, all of their the facts and the occurrences have to be similar. And that's very hard sometimes because you can have people have there's individual things about individual members of the class that are different from other people in the class. So it's not that easy to certify a class, but typically your class actions are consumer-type cases, like products liability. All right, so we're going to represent all the people that bought a medical device that later was found to cause injury. So pretty much those people all use that same product in the same way, and you form a class. The thing about class actions, if you agree to be part of a class, you've given up your individual rights. And you don't ever have to join the class. You can stay separate from the class on your own. The problem is with class action lawsuits, in my experience, at the end of the day, you read about this class action lawsuit settled for $8 million. And you think, wow, those people got a lot of money. Well, probably $6 million went to the lawyers, and $2 million was divided up among 5,000 people. So you get a check in the mail for like $8.93. Class actions, sometimes it's the only way you can litigate a case like that. But
I wanted to ask about pro bono, because I know, are law firms still obligated to do pro bono work, or is that not the case?
okay, the question is, are law firms obligated to do pro bono work? In Massachusetts, law firms are not required to do pro bono work. It's up to the individual attorney whether or not you take pro bono work. Just for the clarification, is where an attorney does not charge the client. You provide the legal services for free. Now, you're all in the medical field, so just don't throw anything at me what I'm about to say, all right? Occasionally there's a push, because everybody knows that lawyers are filthy rich, right? Everybody knows that. It's not true. Let me disabuse you of that notion. But for some reason, every once in a while, there's this push. Let's make lawyers work for free, which is really what pro bono is. How many people here want to work for free? Raise your hands. No hands. Let the record show, no hands. Not that it's wrong to work for free, and I have done pro bono work on occasion, but I don't like being forced to do it by the government. So this is my take on pro bono work. I will do mandatory pro bono work every year right after they make the doctors do pro bono work. I'll be right behind them. No, I think it's not, I don't think it really is appropriate. No one should be forced to work for free. I find that concept offensive. That doesn't mean people shouldn't volunteer, and I know I have many friends in corporate America that their companies do volunteer work a couple of times a year, and they give the employees the day off to go work at a food shelter or something. I'm all for that. But that, to me, that comes from the heart. It doesn't come from that's another area that the government needs to stay out of. Because this is part of the social responsibility of businesses, to give back to the community. I think lawyers should do pro bono when it's the right case at the right time, and if the lawyer can do it and is qualified to do it, and I have done it. But having the government tell me I have to do it, that doesn't sit well. That's my personal opinion. Okay, so you want to avoid legal risk. If you ever end up being an officer or director of a company, whether it's a small company or a big company, obviously there's liability for officers and directors and managers who knowingly participate in fraudulent or illegal activities. You can be personally liable. Can't hide behind the company if you intentionally break the law. Keep that in mind. Another area that's, I think, important in terms of talking about the regulatory environment of business. So this fellow, Ed Thompson, this is the other handout now. You don't have to take the time to read it. You can take it home. His opinion, I'll summarize what he says. So they interviewed him, and in his opinion, the FDA, now this is a government regulatory agency, oversees the marketing of drugs and development of drugs and testing of drugs, is responsible for the opioid epidemic. He puts responsibility squarely on the FDA and the government. Why does he do that? So a government agency, the role of typically of a government agency is to protect consumers and investors, protect the public from harm. We now have an opioid crisis. The FDA, when it originally, and I believe the drug he talks about is oxycodone? OxyContin, I'm sorry. I don't know the difference between those two. You guys are the experts in that. OxyContin. When it was first legalized for use by the public, it was deemed, in all the testing, it was deemed to be a short-term drug for pain management. Somewhere along the line, I think it was around 2011, the FDA allowed a change to the labeling requirements to be used for long-term pain relief. How did that happen? Well, according to this fellow, who's an insider, the FDA, then head of the FDA, along with senior FDA officials, were having private meetings with pharmaceutical company executives and basically being wined and dined, and it became basically a pay for play. In other words, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. Oh, you do this for me, I'll turn the other way and let you have a loosening of these labeling requirements. Once the labeling changed and it was able to be prescribed indefinitely to people, in his opinion, that was the beginning of the opioid epidemic and the addiction of people to these painkillers, using them long term. And the FDA was a part of that, and the past FDA director actually, at least he says in this article, admitted that the FDA made a lot of mistakes regarding the labeling of this drug. So, I mean, how does this happen? This is an agency that's supposed to be the watchdog over us and basically colluding, it's like sending the wolf into the hen house to watch the hens. Colluding with pharmaceutical company executives to relax the distribution of a known addictive drug for which they had not done any testing regarding long-term usage.
So does this mean we should pay people who work for the FDA more?
The question was, does this mean that we should pay people that work for the FDA more? What do you think? Think that would solve the problem? Unfortunately, when it comes to greed, the thing about greed is the more people have, the more they want. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's never enough. Because one house isn't enough. 2 cars are not enough. 3 boats are no longer enough. That's just human nature. Once you have something, you always want to go to the next level or you want more. That's just being human. So I don't know that paying the FDA folks more would help, but we need more watchdogs maybe. We need more checks and double checks. We need a process that does not allow corruption to seep in. And again, this is your field. I don't know anything about this. I just know what I read in this article, and it was disturbing that our government agency essentially may have contributed to, if not created, the opioid epidemic. So again, so does this remind you of anything current in the news? Government agency kind of not doing what it's supposed to do and people getting hurt? Boeing 737.
Oh, yeah, them too.
2 planes down. Never trained the pilots. FAA certified these planes as being safe. Kind of sounds like the same situation, or similar at least. Yes, sir. You want to say something?
Oh, I think it was something previous to this, but I forgot what it was.
Okay, no problem. If it comes back, raise your hand or let me know. Another area, especially in your field, that's important is intellectual property. Intellectual property, we know what property is, right? Property, you have real estate and personal property. So if we want to break it down. So what's real estate?
Is that like real property?
Yeah, so what is it though?
Land?
Is this real estate? Is this table real estate? Is this building real estate?
Possibly.
It is. Real estate is the land with anything that's permanently affixed to the land. So if I have my motor home and I go down and I wheel it onto my property and I decide to sleep there, or maybe at the lake I have some land and I drive my motor home down there and I'm going to sleep there, does my motor home become part of the real estate? Given the definition that I just gave you?
Yes.
Is it permanently affixed to the land?
No.
No, so it's not real estate. The land is real estate, the motorhome is personal property. So what's personal property now that we know what real estate is? Just do the corollary. Personal property is everything else that's not real estate. So basically anything that's movable is personal property. So I don't know what the largest airplane in the world is, well, from the military, C-5A, Starlifter, massive airplane. Is that personal property or real estate? Personal. It's movable. Doesn't matter how big it is. Anything that's movable is personal property. So we talk about intellectual property. Basically, we're talking about patents, trademarks, and copyright. Patents protect inventions. Trademarks protect logos and symbols. And copyright protects works of art that are committed to tangible form. Could be a book, could be a painting, could be a song. When we talk about computer stuff, it gets a little unwieldy. I won't tell you that I'm up to date on exactly where that boundary line is, but for a long time there was confusion, and then the courts kind of said, well, the computer itself, the hardware, is patentable, and the operating system, but the operating system is copyrightable, and software is copyrightable. So they kind of broke it out that way. The other area of intellectual property, now those are all federal statutes. As far as state law goes, there's something called trade secrets. So if something is not protected federally, it may be protected under trade secret law. Trade secret is anything that's confidential and proprietary to the company. Customer lists, recipes. I once had a friend who worked for Coca-Cola. Probably the most famous recipe in the world is the recipe for Coca-Cola, the soft drink. Allegedly, it's locked in a vault wherever Coca-Cola's headquarters is, and only 5 people in the world have the combination. It's a highly protected property of Coca-Cola, that formula, because anybody that has it can make Coca-Cola. But it's not governed by patent, trademark, or copyright. It's governed by trade secret law. So anything that is confidential and proprietary to a company would be considered a trade secret. Now typically when employees work for companies, and you're going to work for companies probably that have lots of information that if you told somebody, a competitor, what you know would hurt your company, they may have you sign what's called a confidentiality agreement, which says that anything I learn while I work for this company, I won't tell anybody else. They may also make you sign in order to work there, which is legal. They won't physically make you sign it, I don't think. Is a non-compete agreement, non-competition agreement, which says if I leave this company, I won't work for a competitor, usually for a certain time frame, typically 1 to 2 years. So again, why do companies do this? Because they spend time and money developing these processes, developing these recipes, gaining a customer base, establishing pricing lists, and they don't want that to be public because the competition will use that. Business competition is brutal. Companies are always looking to gain a competitive advantage in the market, to get more market share. Geez, I feel like I'm back teaching business courses again.
Can I chime in on one thing too?
Sure.
Non-disclosures with your customers. I used to work in sales and marketing, and we're giving customers early insight into our product direction. What we don't want them to do is go over to our competitor and say, here's what XYZ company is doing. So there's a non-disclosure that you typically would have your customer sign, especially if they're getting early access or information on a new product or a new service.
Good point.
I know that Hasbro, they used to be here in Massachusetts, but they had, back in the day, photocopying machines, and every time somebody put something on the photocopying machine, there was a record of it to prevent them sharing the information with somebody else, because they had all kinds of designs for games and drawings, and all that was protected. So under the copyright sort of segment.
Right. So you have confidentiality agreements with employees, especially your higher level employees, which you guys hopefully will be. You have non-competition agreements, and then you have non-disclosure agreements that can be used with vendors, customers. A lot of companies that do R&D, research and development, they have a new product and they want to, they may have to bring in some people to make a prototype or to help them to get it to market. And you don't want to expose that product or that new idea to somebody without a non-disclosure agreement, because once you put it out there, they can take it and sell it to your competition. So, and these are all this is a good segue, because I'm running out of time, into probably one of the most important areas of business law would be the area of contracts. Contracts are the glue that hold businesses together. Really briefly, a contract is a bargain for agreement. You have to have certain elements. There has to be an offer, an acceptance. There has to be consideration. In other words, if I say, do you want this marker?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a contract? I got to go back in front of the camera. So I just walked up and I handed a student the marker and said, do you want it? And he said yes, and he took it. The question is that a contract? Did we just make a contract? Well, was there an offer? Yeah. I said, do you want this marker? Was there an acceptance? He said yes, and I gave it to him. Why isn't that a contract?
Because we didn't shake on it? Yeah.
No, you don't need to shake. What did I get out of the deal?
Feeling good?
Okay, it felt good. I knew you really wanted it because you've been looking at this marker the whole class. I knew you really wanted it. So I went over and I gave it to you, and it made me feel good. Well, what do we call that when we give somebody something and we don't expect anything back and we feel good after?
A good deed. Donation?
Gift. I made a gift to you. It's not a contract. Actually, I could have gone up to you and said, do you want this marker? You could have said yes. I could have reached it out or handed it to you. You could have reached to get it, and I could have said I changed my mind. Could I have done that? Yeah, a gift is revocable until it's delivered.
Question about like buying cars then. Like,
Okay.
Okay, so sometimes like I go and look at cars and stuff, right? And then like if I drive off the lot and stuff like that, like they say that's like part of like the agreement. Like what else is there? Do I have to watch out for when I go like purchase a car that I don't want in the end?
Okay, that's a multi-phase question. Talking about buying a car, you would have a written agreement, a sales contract, And then we get into some other areas of contract. So let me just step back. I'm not going to forget to answer your question. And we'll probably end it on this note. I think we kind of went through the list pretty well. So in contracts, there's two types of contract law. It'll be my last diagram. So in contract law, we have what's called the common law, and then we have something called the Uniform Commercial Code. Uniform codes are bodies of law that are written by academics, and then states will adopt them. And the nice thing is, if all the states decide to adopt a uniform code or some variation of it, now when we go state to state, we can have an understanding of what the law is. In other words, every state isn't totally different. And that's very important because we have such a fast-paced business environment now, and commerce is being transacted intrastate all the time. So it's to have a common sort of body of law is helpful. So the common law is what I just told you. You need offer, acceptance, consideration. You need to have a legal subject matter. I can't hire somebody to kill somebody. I can't hire somebody to, or I can't sell illegal drugs. Those are illegal contracts. It doesn't matter if there's offer, acceptance, consideration. The person I'm doing business with or doing a contract with has to be of legal age, not a minor, not incompetent, hopefully sober. When we did those barroom deals written on napkins, those are always challenged. So there's those things that have to go in. That's okay for buying a car even, or in the old days, buying a pig, a goat, or whatever. But it doesn't work in our modern industrialized society. So a number of decades ago, a group of legal scholars came up with this Uniform Commercial Code. The code only applies to pretty much to transactions in goods. A good is anything that's movable. So again, it doesn't apply to real estate, and it doesn't apply to service contracts. Contracts can be for one of three things. It could be a service contract. I'm going to hire Beyonce to sing at my daughter's, birthday party. It's a service contract. It's not governed by the Uniform Commercial Code. It can be a contract for goods, in which it would be covered by the Commercial Code. So I'll throw this out to you. So I hire you to paint my house, and we agree that you're going to paint my house for $5,000, all material, paint and all the supplies included. In other words, you're going to furnish the paint and everything. So is that a contract for goods or a contract for services? And would a breach of that contract be governed by the Uniform Commercial Code or by the common law?
Service?
Yeah, but you're supplying the paint.
He's gonna go and get it though.
No, you're going to bring it.
Oh, I'm gonna bring it.
It's a contract for goods and labor and materials. So it's a mixed contract. So courts have looked at those differently. Typically a court will look at, well, what's the so-called center of gravity of the contract? Is the most important part of the contract the paint, or is it the service of actually putting the paint on the house? Most of the contract is going to go towards the labor. Paint will be as a percentage of the total contract, not as much. Anyway, so contracts very important, and contracts in most cases do not have to be written, but some contracts do. Contracts for the sale of real estate, contracts that bind a personal representative of an estate, and so there's a few others. That's called the statute of frauds. Generally, if you have a legal issue, you should consult with a lawyer right away, because another important concept is that if you sit on your rights, you could possibly lose them. Every legal action has what's called a statute of limitations. So contracts typically are 6 years. Personal injury and other what we call torts, non-contractual injuries, are 3 years. And then some other statutes are different. So employment law, discrimination cases have to be brought within within 180 days. You have to bring your claim within 180 days. So some statutes of limitations are very short. If you think you have a legal issue, consult with a lawyer. Always ask for a free consultation. Any lawyer that doesn't give you a free consultation, find one that will, because most lawyers do, and find out what your rights are. Knowledge is power. If you know what your rights are, then you can move from there and make good decisions. I think I'm out of time. Maybe one or two, if anybody has a burning question that I didn't get to or anything. In the back?
When you were talking about pro bono, why would a lawyer choose to go with a pro bono case, and like what are some examples of those cases?
Okay, good. The question is regarding pro bono work by a lawyer. Why would a lawyer do a pro bono case, and what types of cases would a lawyer take pro bono? I had a case couple of years ago. Lawyers take pro bono cases for the same reasons that people do charity work, that corporations donate to the community, sponsor a Little League team, because it's one, it's a sense of giving back to the community that has afforded you, or me in my case, being the lawyer, a living. There are just some cases there are just some cases that are compelling, and the person needs a lawyer and they can't get one any other way. The last one I did was I represented a woman who had lost custody of her son because she was in an abusive domestic relationship, and she actually had to defend herself with a kitchen knife from her abusive spouse. And as a result of it, she was charged criminally, even though she didn't kill him. She was charged criminally, and she totally lost custody of her son and didn't see her son for a number of years. The father of the child, they divorced. The father of the child got in I think it was an automobile accident, and became very disabled, and the child was getting older and was having trouble caring for the child. And so she needed somebody to get her back into her child's life and to be an influence for the child because the father was not able to do it anymore. So that was the last pro bono case, that I was involved in. Sometimes you do what you have to do because it's the right thing to do. I'm not holding myself up as any different than anybody else in this room. I'm just you asked for an example, I'm giving you an example. So I don't mind doing pro bono work, but I prefer to decide, when I do it and how I do it. That's all. Well, you've been a great audience. Thank you so much for letting me in your classroom, and thank you to your professor, Bonnie. Thank you.
No other questions? I've got to give you a gift.
Oh.
So anytime you have a presenter, you got to give them something. So this is for you.
I wasn't expecting anything. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Clean craft.
I will
It's a nice bottle of wine.
I will take that home.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is, it sort of wasn't planned as part of the agenda tonight, but I looked at topics number 5, 6, and 7. You look at that on your sheet, 5, 6, and 7. Looked in 2 startup companies, and one of the companies, when they were growing from, let's say, 150 to about 250 employees in the software industry back in the 1980s, and I had hair in my head and all that good stuff. The CEO got wind of one of our R&D directors going to a competitor. And all of a sudden, the customer was getting an early release of our software. He's evaluating the company that's pretty mature, we've been in the business for 5 years, and this other company, maybe 6 months. And the exact same error message showed up, both sets of code, both sets of applications. So the CEO got wind of this through the Attorney General. And they decided to go in and shut down the other company, company ABC. So when you don't have the right ethical situation in place, and you have no contracts in place with the employees that keep them from going to a competitor, from going in and taking intellectual property, that can be quite devastating for the company. Now, the twist on all the story is, when the CEO got wind of this, he went in and short-sailed that startup company's stock. Conflict of interest. He knows he can make a ton of money. It was actually his mistress who bought the stock, knowing that they were going to shut down this company for 6 months and the stock would be a short sale to make a ton of money. So there's 2 or 3 things to take away from this little war story, and that is, you got to have the contracts in place. You got to have ethical employees making better decisions. And you also have to look at the contractual agreements they have in place. And I think that's huge. With the industry that you're getting involved in, contracts are going to be key. Thank you.